Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're standing at the edge of an infinite ocean, feeling the salty breeze touch your face, hearing the roar of waves breaking endlessly on the sand. Suddenly, a question arises in your mind. What do you feel when facing something so immense and powerful that it seems impossible to control? Fear, admiration, or perhaps a mixture of both that makes your heart race? Now imagine that thousands of years ago, our ancestors looked at these same waters and saw much more than just H2O. They saw living gods, breathing, feeling, deciding the fate of entire civilizations with a simple movement. Today I'm going to take you on an epic journey through time and space to meet three of the most fascinating and powerful aquatic deities humanity has ever created. Poseidon, the temperamental lord of the Greek seas; Nun, the mysterious Egyptian primordial ocean; and Enki, the wise protector of Mesopotamian waters. Have you ever wondered why completely different cultures, separated by thousands of kilometers and centuries, all developed water gods? Why does water, this common element, awaken in us an almost universal reverence? The answer goes far beyond the obvious, and when you discover it, your vision of the world will never be the same. Prepare to dive into stories that will make you question everything you thought about power, wisdom, and human nature. Because these aren't just dusty ancient myths, they're mirrors of the human soul that continue reflecting our deepest hopes, fears, and dreams even today. Before we embark on this epic adventure through the waters of history, I want to know from you, what's the most intense experience you've ever had with water? Was it swimming in the sea during a storm? Or perhaps watching a tranquil river that changed your life perspective? Share in the comments. Your personal stories can inspire thousands of other people watching this video. If you're ready for this transformative journey, show your energy. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like so more people discover these incredible stories, and share with those friends who love diving deep into fascinating mysteries. And here's a question that will echo throughout the entire video. Do you believe there are still forces in nature that deserve our respect and reverence, or have we completely lost that ancestral connection? To truly understand the power of these three gods, we first need to dive into a reality you may never have considered. Imagine living in an era when your survival completely depended on nature's moods. No weather forecast, no advanced irrigation system, no desalinators or water purifiers. Your life literally hung by a thread, or rather, by a drop. Now multiply this vulnerability by millions of people, for thousands of years. Suddenly, that relationship we have today with water, turning on a tap and expecting it to simply flow, becomes an unimaginable luxury. In this context, water wasn't just a resource. It was a daily miracle, an uncertain blessing, a power that could give life or decree the death of entire civilizations. Did you know that even today, more than 2 billion people in the world don't have access to safe drinking water at home? This reality, which seems distant to many of us, was the absolute norm for our ancestors. It's precisely from this vulnerability that water gods were born. They weren't just story characters. They were desperate and brilliant attempts to understand, negotiate, and coexist with the most important force for human existence. Let's begin our journey in the crystal clear and turbulent waters of the Aegean Sea. Imagine you being a Greek sailor 3,000 years ago, navigating between rocky islands with only a small wooden vessel between you and an infinite blue abyss. Suddenly the sky darkens, waves grow like liquid mountains, and you know your life is in Poseidon's hands. Poseidon wasn't just the sea god. He was the very embodiment of the wild and untamable nature of waters. Son of Cronus and Rhea, brother of Zeus and Hades, he had gained dominion over the oceans when the three brothers divided the universe after defeating the Titans. But his realm wasn't limited to salt waters. He also controlled earthquakes, created horses, and had power over all fresh waters that flowed through the earth. Let me tell you a story that might seem familiar. Marcos, a fisherman from Santorini I met a few years ago, told me about a storm he faced when he was only 17 years old. I was alone in my grandfather's boat, he said, with eyes still shining with emotion decades later. The waves were so high they looked like buildings falling on me. For 3 hours I could only scream to Poseidon, promising anything if he let me return home. Marcos isn't particularly religious, but in that moment, facing the fury of the sea, he experienced something his Greek ancestors knew well, the almost tangible presence of a force greater than himself. The ancient Greeks didn't venerate Poseidon by choice, they did it out of necessity. His authority was absolute, because it was literally a matter of life and death. Festivals like the Poseidonia weren't casual celebrations, but vital negotiations with a power that could destroy entire cities with a tsunami or bless them with abundant fish. Poseidon's trident, his most recognizable symbol, represents much more than just an instrument of power. Each of its 3 points symbolized a different aspect of his domain: the past, present, and future of waters, the creation, maintenance, and destruction that waters bring, and the connection between sky, earth, and underground oceans. Surprising fact that few know, Poseidon had a complex relationship with Athena, the goddess of wisdom. Both competed to be the patron of Athens, and Poseidon offered a magnificent gift. He struck his trident on the rock of the Acropolis and created a saltwater spring. Athena, in turn, planted an olive tree. The Athenians chose Athena, but Poseidon never forgot this rejection. This teaches us something profound. Even gods deal with rejection and resentment, mirroring our own most universal emotional experiences. Think about moments in your life when you felt you were at the mercy of forces greater than you. How did you react? With anger, as Poseidon frequently did? With negotiation? With acceptance? The Greeks understood that Poseidon was both protector and destroyer. Because nature itself is ambivalent, it owes us nothing, but it can also offer us everything. Now let's travel to a completely different scenario, the banks of the Nile, where the golden desert meets the green and lush life that the river brings. Here, in the cradle of Egyptian civilization, we find a conception of aquatic divinity radically different from Poseidon. Nun wasn't an anthropomorphic god like Poseidon. He was the very concept of the primordial ocean, the infinite and chaotic waters that existed before the creation of the world. Imagine trying to visualize the nothing that existed before the something. That's the magnitude of Nun. He represents the cosmic womb from which all life emerged. Think of the exact moment before you fall asleep, when your mind is neither awake nor asleep, but floating in an undefined space between consciousness and dreams. That's the nature of Nun. Not chaos in a destructive sense, but pure potential, infinite possibility, waiting to become reality. For the Egyptians, who lived in an environment where life literally depended on the annual flooding of the Nile, water represented renewal and rebirth. The concept of Nun was profoundly influenced by this reality. Every year, as the Nile overflowed its banks, transforming dry desert into fertile farmland, the Egyptians witnessed a recreation of the original act of creation emerging from primordial waters. Aisha, a modern Egyptian archaeologist who works on excavations near Luxor, explained something fascinating to me. When you're in the desert for days, water becomes more than water. It becomes hope, possibility, future. My great-grandfather used to say that each drop of Nile water carried the memory of Nun, a promise that life always finds a way. Nun offers us something that neither Poseidon nor Enki can, the promise that even from complete chaos, even from seeming nothingness, something beautiful and life-giving can emerge. This is particularly relevant in our era of rapid change and uncertainty. Unlike the elaborate temples dedicated to other Egyptian gods, Nun was honored in a more abstract way. Pools of water in temples were considered manifestations of the primordial ocean. Priests would meditate beside these waters, seeking to connect with the original source of all existence. Modern cosmology actually echoes ancient Egyptian cosmogony in fascinating ways. The concept of the Big Bang emerging from a quantum foam of possibilities bears striking similarities to Nun as the source of all existence. Perhaps ancient Egyptians, through careful observation and deep contemplation, intuited something fundamental about the nature of reality itself. The gender neutrality of Nun is also significant. Unlike Poseidon's very masculine energy, or Enki's paternal wisdom, Nun transcends gender categories, another indication of his role as the most fundamental force, existing before even such basic distinctions were made. Our journey now takes us to the fertile valleys between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where one of the most sophisticated ancient civilizations developed a relationship with water that was both practical and deeply spiritual. Here, in ancient Mesopotamia, we encounter Enki, perhaps the most complex and humanistic of our three water deities. Enki was the lord of fresh waters, wisdom, mischief, water, seawater, craftsman, and creation. But more than that, he was consistently portrayed as humanity's friend and protector. While other deities often seemed distant or demanding, Enki was the god who taught humans useful skills, warned them of dangers, and helped them solve problems through cleverness rather than brute force. During a research trip to Iraq a few years ago, I met an elderly man named Hussein, who was part of a family that had been farming along the Euphrates for generations. My grandfather, he told me, used to speak to the water before each planting season, not begging, not fearing, but conversing, like talking to a wise uncle who always had good advice, but also expected you to think for yourself. This perfectly captures Enki's essence. Unlike Poseidon's unpredictable moods or Nun's incomprehensible vastness, Enki was approachable. He was the deity who would teach you how to dig a well, rather than simply sending rain, who would show you irrigation techniques instead of just flooding your fields. Enki's worship was so widespread and enduring that traces of his influence can be found in religious traditions across the Middle East, including elements that influenced later biblical narratives. The flood story in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Enki warns Utnapishtim about a coming deluge, preceded and likely influenced the biblical account of Noah's Ark. The most famous myth about Enki tells how he tricked other gods into giving humans essential knowledge that the deities wanted to keep for themselves. He taught agriculture, brewing, crafts, and even lawmaking. This portrayal of a god actively working to improve human conditions was relatively rare in ancient mythology, and makes Enki particularly appealing to modern sensibilities. Enki's association with both water and technology wasn't accidental. In Mesopotamia, managing water required sophisticated engineering, canals, dikes, irrigation systems, water storage. Enki represented the principle that intelligence applied to natural resources could create abundance instead of scarcity. Consider this striking parallel. Today's debates about sustainable water management, climate change adaptation, and technological solutions to environmental challenges echo the same tensions between working with natural forces versus trying to dominate them that Enki embodied. In our modern world, we often view technology and nature as opposing forces. Enki suggests a different paradigm, that true wisdom lies in using human intelligence to work harmoniously with natural systems. This perspective feels incredibly relevant as we face global challenges like water scarcity, climate change, and environmental degradation. Now that we know our three protagonists individually, let's explore how they represent fundamentally different approaches to understanding and relating with the power of water. Poseidon represents raw power and respect through fear. A Poseidonian approach to water is about acknowledging its awesome power and either appeasing it or learning to navigate its moods. This mindset shaped Mediterranean cultures that developed sophisticated sailing technologies and maritime trade networks, but always with deep respect for the ocean's unpredictability. In modern terms, Poseidon's approach might be seen in how we deal with extreme weather events, hurricanes, tsunamis, floods. We develop early warning systems, build sea walls, and evacuate when necessary, but ultimately we acknowledge that some forces of nature are beyond our complete control. Nun represents acceptance of cosmic mystery. The Nun approach is about finding peace with uncertainty and chaos, seeing them not as enemies, but as necessary preconditions for renewal and growth. This is particularly relevant in times of personal or social upheaval. Think about entrepreneurs who thrive in uncertain markets, artists who find inspiration in chaos, or people who view career changes or life transitions as opportunities rather than threats. They're channeling a nun-like ability to find potential in apparent disorder. Enki represents collaborative intelligence. The Enki model suggests that the best relationship with natural forces combines respect, observation, intelligence, and cooperation. Rather than fearing or simply accepting, Enki's approach is about learning, adapting, and creating mutually beneficial relationships. This philosophy is reflected in modern sustainable technology, permaculture farming, biomimicry and engineering, renewable energy systems that work with, rather than against, natural processes. Each of these approaches offers gifts to those who embrace them, but also demands something in return. Poseidon grants safe passage but demands respect and appropriate offerings. None provides renewal, but requires letting go of rigid control. Enki shares wisdom, but expects you to use it responsibly to benefit others. How can these ancient water deities speak to our contemporary challenges and personal growth? Let me share some profound connections that might surprise you. Our current climate crisis can be understood through all three mythological frameworks. Rising sea levels and extreme weather events echo Poseidon's wrath when humans overstep boundaries. Global environmental chaos mirrors Nun's primordial state, forcing us to imagine new ways of organizing civilization, and our need for innovative, cooperative solutions calls for Enki-like wisdom. In your own life, you likely encounter situations that call for different types of water wisdom. Facing a sudden crisis might require Poseidonian courage and acceptance of forces beyond your control. Major life transitions might benefit from a nun-like ability to let go of old patterns and trust in new possibilities. Solving complex problems at work or in relationships often calls for Enki's collaborative, intelligent approach. These mythologies also offer perspectives on our relationship with modern technology. A purely Poseidonian approach might view technology as something to fear or dominate. A Nun perspective might see it as part of ongoing cosmic evolution. An Enki approach would emphasize using technology wisely to improve life for everyone, not just ourselves. Leading anthropologists and psychologists today recognize that mythological thinking isn't primitive. It's a sophisticated way of processing complex emotional and spiritual relationships with forces larger than ourselves. Dr. Joseph Campbell, Dr. Carl Jung, and contemporary researchers like Dr. Maria Lugonis have shown how mythological frameworks remain vital for psychological health and cultural meaning-making. Let me take you on a journey around today's world to see how these ancient water wisdom traditions continue to manifest in different cultures and contexts. In Aboriginal Australian culture, Indigenous Australians have maintained relationship with water spirits for over 60,000 years. Their rainbow serpent mythology shares elements with all three of our deities: the power of Poseidon, primordial nature of Nun, and wisdom-giving aspects of Enki of water spirits. In Hindu tradition, river goddesses like Ganga combine Poseidon's power to purify and destroy, Nun's role as source of life, and Enki's gift of wisdom and prosperity. Millions of people today still bathe in these rivers, seeking spiritual purification and blessing. In indigenous American traditions, from the Pacific Northwest salmon ceremonies to Amazonian river spirit traditions, indigenous cultures worldwide maintain sophisticated relationships with water entities that echo our three archetypes. In contemporary urban environments, even in modern cities, people create relationships with water that reflect these ancient patterns. Surfers develop Poseidonian relationships with ocean power. Urban gardeners channel Enki's wisdom about irrigation and sustainable growing. People who practice water meditation or live near rivers often describe experiences reminiscent of Nun's primordial peace. Have you ever wondered why humans seem universally drawn to water features in their living spaces, fountains, aquariums, riverside homes, oceanfront properties? Perhaps we're still responding to ancient hardwiring that recognizes water as sacred, powerful, and essential for our well-being. These mythological frameworks also illuminate contemporary issues of environmental justice. When corporations pollute water supplies, they're essentially desecrating what these traditions recognize as sacred. When communities fight for water rights, they're engaging in struggles that echo ancient relationships between humans and water deities. The Standing Rock protests, where indigenous activists fought to protect sacred waters from pipeline development, can be understood as a modern manifestation of ancient wisdom about respecting water's sacred power and our responsibilities as stewards rather than masters. We've reached the end of this epic journey through the sacred waters of humanity, and I want you to pause for a moment to feel what you learned, not just intellectually, but emotionally and spiritually. When you started this video, maybe water was just H2O for you, a resource, a necessity, something you take for granted when you turn on a faucet. But now, hopefully, you can see that our relationship with water is one of the most fundamental ways humans have always tried to understand themselves, their place in the cosmos and their responsibilities to each other and the natural world. Poseidon taught us that some forces demand our respect and humility, that power without wisdom becomes destruction, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is acknowledge when you're not in control. Nun showed us that chaos isn't always enemy. Sometimes it's the necessary condition for new life, new possibilities, new ways of being. That letting go of rigid certainties can open us to transformations we never imagined possible. Enki demonstrated that wisdom comes through cooperation, that the best solutions benefit everyone, and that intelligence without compassion is incomplete wisdom. But here's what might be the most important insight of all. These aren't just ancient stories about gods, they're mirrors reflecting different aspects of your own relationship with the forces that shape your life. Every time you face uncertainty, you can choose to respond with Poseidon's courage, Nun's acceptance, or Enki's creative intelligence. Every time you encounter something more powerful than yourself, you have choices about how to engage. If you integrate just one lesson from these ancient wisdom traditions into your daily life, you'll find yourself more resilient, more creative, and more connected to the world around you. Start small. Next time you drink water, take a moment to appreciate not just its physical necessity, but its symbolic power. When you face a challenge that feels overwhelming, ask yourself, what would Poseidon's courage look like here? How might Nun's acceptance of uncertainty help me? What creative, collaborative solution might Enki envision? The water cycle continues its eternal dance: evaporation, condensation, precipitation, flow, connecting every living thing on Earth in an endless circulation of renewal. You are part of that cycle, not just physically but spiritually. Every breath you take contains water molecules that have been part of clouds, rivers, plants, animals, and other humans throughout history. As we face a future where water scarcity affects billions, where climate change disrupts ancient patterns, where technology offers both solutions and new challenges, we need the wisdom of Poseidon, Nun, and Enki more than ever. We need to respect natural power, embrace necessary change, and apply our intelligence compassionately. So my final question for you is this: which of these three water deities calls to you most strongly right now in your life? Are you facing something that requires Poseidonian courage? Going through changes that call for Nun-like trust in the unknown? Dealing with problems that need Enki's collaborative wisdom? Whatever your answer, remember, you carry within yourself the same creative power that gave birth to these magnificent mythologies. Your life is your own epic story, and like these ancient gods, you have the power to bring blessing or destruction, chaos or order, wisdom or confusion to the world around you. Choose wisely. The waters are waiting. If this video touched something deep in you, share it with others who might need these ancient insights for modern challenges. Subscribe for more journeys into the wisdom traditions that still have so much to teach us. And leave a comment telling me which water deity resonates most with your current life situation. Your insights might inspire someone else who needs to hear exactly what you have learned. The conversation continues in the comments, and every share spreads these ripples of ancient wisdom a little further into our modern world. Remember, you are both the storyteller and the hero in your own epic. Make it legendary.